Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to episode 7 of Sports Talk from the Heart with Nicky Steez. This is Brian Dawkins' jersey right here, in case you're wondering what I'm representing. So, yes, I'm representing Philadelphia Eagles, representing Brian Dawkins today. So far, we got Further AM. Stop by in the chat real quickly. Good afternoon, Further. Thanks for dropping by. So, for today's episode 7, if you've seen my Twitter and you've seen my YouTube community page, you already know what I got in store. But for anyone who doesn't know what I got in store today, we're going to talk a little bit about running backs in the NFL, particularly their salary or the lack of salary they're getting in comparison to other positions in the NFL. And then we're going to actually talk about the boxing world a little bit. It's going to be a big welterweight unification fight on Saturday between Earl Spence Jr. and Terrence Bud Crawford. So that's what's in store for today. So any note, let's get into it. So we're going to start off. Actually, going to talk a little bit about some of the NFL news that's been going on. First, we did get, yesterday it was confirmed Marcus Peters signed a 1-year deal with the Raiders. Yeah, I dropped a short about that about an hour ago on my channel. So Marcus Peters into the Raiders, it's a 1-year deal. Now, from a talent standpoint alone, he's an upgrade for the Raiders, considering how bad their secondary is. For a team like the Raiders that's got nothing to lose at that position, I mean, you need to do something to at least improve. If they're going to take a chance on a player like Peters, knowing his injury risks, and they decide, you know what, he's at least a veteran who has some respectable on-field leadership traits. So they decide, you know what, let's take a shot on him. Let's see how this goes. So ultimately, they decide to give it a chance. And also, you got Saquon got 1-year deal out of this whole ordeal with the Giants. It's going to be kind of a prove-it deal. I guess Saquon realized ultimately he was just going to have to accept whatever just so he could at least step on the field and play. And ultimately, hey, Saquon Barkley's been forced to just swallow his pride and accept the fact that he's at least got a job for the season. I mean, he's still making more than most people, though, so she should at least be happy with that. But I get from the player's standpoint, they want to get paid more. They feel like if they can negotiate their way into more money, they can. So I don't blame them. I get from the player's standpoint why they would want more money. So I don't necessarily blame them. But here's the thing with these running backs, though. These running backs aren't getting paid as much. And the main reason why is because the value of the position, long-term value, has been devalued. You know what's interesting? I saw a video from Urinating Trees. Some of you guys have probably seen the Urinating Trees channel before. You probably know exactly who I'm talking about. But yep, Urinating Tree, he did a video talking about running backs and why they've been devalued and why they're not getting paid as much, which was an excellent video. I actually went back and rewatched it several times. And there were a lot of great points he brought up in that, too. And that's what made me decide, you know what? Inspired me to come on here and make that one of the main subjects for today's episode. So let's get into it. But obviously with guys like Saquon, Joshua Jacobs not getting the money they wanted initially, it's created a discussion of why running backs aren't getting paid as much. And the main reason why is because they have an extremely short shelf term life, especially nowadays. I mean, geez, you know, how many running backs do you know have those like 15 to 20-year careers? How many? Very few. I mean, Frank Gore and Adrian Peterson, that was just a miracle that those two went as long as they did, especially in the case of Frank Gore. I was surprised he was able to go as long as he did at the NFL level. But yeah, it's not, you don't get that a whole lot. There's a lot of running backs that they have a hot season, they start off with a spark, but in the long term, they don't pan out as well. I mean, I could name plenty of running backs in recent years, over the past decade or so, that had a spark, a good season or two, and then started to fall off after that. Remember Alfred Morris from Washington with that RG3 year? He didn't pan out in the long term, did it? He ended up being this backup running back for the Cowboys for a few years in the later portion of the 2010s. And then, of course, you had other guys. You had Marlon Mack from the Colts. He had that one really good season. But what happened with him after that? He fell off in the long term. You remember David Johnson from the Cardinals? Remember he had that breakout year in 2015, but then ultimately injuries caught up to him. And then in 2019, of course, Bill O'Brien decided he was worth getting in return for DeAndre Hopkins. But then in Houston, how did that work out? That went as well as expected. But who else did you have? You had some other guys that you had that had maybe one good year or so. You had Philip Lindsay. Remember Philip Lindsay from the Broncos? 1 year wonder, 2018. I mean, there's so many others too. You remember DeMarco Murray? He had a sparker. DeMarco Murray, to me, was the biggest underachieving running back of the past decade. He's someone on paper that should have done more, but only went so far. Remember that stint when we made the deal for him? When we paid up for him back in 2015, how disastrous that was for us as the Eagles? Good grief. That was the beginning of the end of his career. But yeah, a lot of these running backs only have short-term shelf life. Like I just named some right there. Hell, Todd Gurley, remember him? He had that big spark with the Rams, and he quickly fell off there. Now he's fell off the face of the earth. I mean, so many different running backs I could name right now that maybe had a spark, and now they're not really there. You had, like I said, Philip Lindsay, Marlon Mack. Oh, you remember Melvin Gordon with the Chargers? Remember him? Oh, Jay Ajayi with the Eagles. He played a role in us winning Super Bowl, and he quickly fell off after that. I mean, the point is there's a lot of running backs that are easily replaceable that have a short-term shelf life, and that's why teams aren't going to pay this extra amount of money for running backs when they feel like running backs can be replaceable in the long term. Just look at some of the running backs I just named as examples of running backs only have short-term shelf life, like the Marlon Macks, the Philip Lindsays of the world. Hell, even Carlos Hyde you could throw in there, Jay Ajayi. Teams know that ultimately running backs are replaceable in the long term. And furthermore, the running back role has drastically changed, and the way teams use offenses have changed too. Now you see teams, they do a lot more passing plays now than running plays, especially over the past 2 decades. Like you compare 2003 to 2023, majority of teams are pass first based teams in the modern NFL. And not to mention on top of that, when it comes to running, now you have the emergence of the dual threat quarterbacks like the Lamar Jacksons, the Jalen Hurts. Hell, even Patrick Mahomes to some degree is a dual threat QB. He sometimes runs too. Even Josh Allen with Buffalo to some degree is a dual threat running back. And now this year, you're talking about this coming up to the draft. You're probably going to have some more guys coming out like Anthony Richardson's or Bryce Young's could potentially be some of those fit in that category too. So for a lot of teams now, they're also using their quarterbacks as main runners too. So they don't feel the running back position is as valuable and as important when they already have a dual threat quarterback. So there's another factor right there. I mean, even before that, guys like Cam Newton, Russell Wilson. So you've started to see that change over the past decade as well. So on top of having running backs having short-term shelf life where they get a hot start, then they have a fall off or an injury force them to retire early. Like remember Jordan Howard, he had a hot start with the Bears, and I hate to say, but when he came to the Eagles, that was kind of the beginning of the end for him with the Eagles. And now he's pretty much irrelevant. And not to mention, on top of it, with these running backs, you got to give the offensive line credit as well for why these running backs do as good as they did. I mean, Miles Sanders with the Eagles last year behind that offensive line, he had his first Pro Bowl season, his first 1,000+ yard running season. But at the same time, he also showed he's fumble prone too, and he made several key fumbles throughout the season. And that's why the Eagles ultimately felt like come free agents time, he wasn't a main priority. They felt like, hey, they can move on. If he goes sign somewhere else, hey, thank you for your work. Best of luck in your future endeavors. We'll go find another running back. And ultimately, they go for DeAndre Swift. They got Rashad Penny. Maybe they're going to use him as a number 2 back because they know he has injury concerns. But point is, teams feel these running backs are replaceable. And now my team's moving on for Miles Sanders after a Pro Bowl year because they feel like they're confident enough in their offensive line that they feel like they'd rather invest more in the line than invest in particular running backs. And now Miles Sanders with the Panthers, all I can say is good luck with that. Good luck trying to duplicate last season's statistical numbers behind that offensive line. But obviously, yeah, you see that, and plus with the offensive line, like take a look at the 49ers too. With Christian McCaffrey. I mean, a guy like Christian McCaffrey, when he had to take on a majority of the work with the Panthers because they didn't really have a quarterback in like 2020, 2021, guess what? He had some injuries and his seasons were shortened. But then he goes to the 49ers where they have better talent around, from the offensive line to the receivers. Guess what? Christian McCaffrey was actually able to stay healthy and be more efficient and play more frequently behind that 49ers team where he didn't have to take on as much responsibility. That's another reason why these running backs don't have long-term shelf life, especially the ones that got to take on a lot of responsibility between being involved in the passing game, the running game. And that's what happened with Run CMC in Carolina and why he had several key injuries. But then he got traded to a better situation with the 49ers and he stayed healthy. And then when it comes to the offensive line, take a look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Le'Veon Bell is a perfect example of how valuable an offensive line is. Because Le'Veon Bell was at his best behind that Steelers offensive line. His style of running, where he could be patient and wait for blocks to open, was perfectly suited for that Steelers with that awesome offensive line they had. He could do that there. But then when he decided to hold out, he went to the Jets. He didn't have the same offensive line. His one strength he had his whole career completely diminished, and so did the rest of his career, where even now Le'Veon regrets that decision. So you got to also factor in with these running backs, they're really as good as the offensive line. And that's why some teams recently are investing more in the offensive line. It's because they feel like they're more valuable than the running backs. I mean, that sounds harsh to hear. And that's harsh to hear for some fans of these star running backs like Joshua Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones, so on and so forth, but it is a reality of it. I mean, teams don't feel that, hey, AK, thanks for stopping by. Hope everything's going good. I hope your recovery's going better. Again, I wish you well with your recovery, so thanks for stopping by quickly. And right. And gone are the days of guys where you had star running backs like Jim Brown, Walter Payton, Eric Dickerson, Barry Sanders, hell, even Larry Zonka from the Dolphins. I mean, those days where running backs were that important are gone. Even the days of guys like Marshall Faulks, those days are gone. Or the Edgerrin Jameses of the world, or even Ricky Williams. You don't get that anymore. Or LaDainian Tomlinson. Especially now, more teams relying on the passing game, and dual threat quarterbacks has played a significant role in the running back being devalued. And plus, they don't last as long, too. So when you got dual threat quarterbacks that can do some of the running for you, like with the Eagles with Jalen Hurts, especially in short yardage situations, or even Buffalo with Josh Allen, or even Kansas City Patrick Mahomes, like I said earlier, you don't have to worry about running back as much. And that's a trend that's going to continue. Even the Falcons tried it with Marcus Mariota. Now, Mariota wasn't as successful as the other quarterbacks, of course, but the point I'm getting at is more teams are investing on the dual threat quarterbacks and trying to make magic with that. Then there's pros and cons that comes with that, but that's another subject for another time in itself. But yeah, obviously, but the main thing is because running backs are replaceable and, they have a short-term shelf life. That's why they're ultimately not getting paid the big bucks like it used to be in years past. I mean, even kickers are getting paid more now because even kickers have longer-term shelf life. I mean, some people hate hearing that, but it is a reality of the game. It's become the new normal for the NFL. It's a new normal we as fans have to accept. It's something that these running backs are going to have to accept as well. And I hate to say it, but that is part of the way it works. Because even guys like Justin Tucker for the Ravens, he was been valuable for them long term. Or Stephen Gostkowski all those years in New England. Or Adam Vinatieri all those years in Indianapolis before he fell off. Or Matt Bryant for Atlanta. They were more valuable long term than a lot of the running backs. Or even Devontae Freeman. Well, there's another running back that is short-term shelf life while Atlanta comes to mind. But hell, even Jake Elliott for the Eagles, he's the most reliable long-term kicker we've had since David Akers. And the point I'm getting is even kickers have a longer shelf life nowadays. But man, that is just the reality of modern day NFL with these running backs. And while we're still on the subject of football now, before I switch gears to the main subject of this episode, we have been getting some stories coming out of training camp. One of the main ones was you did have CJ Gardner-Johnson got an injury yesterday for the Detroit Lions. Now, apparently, it's gonna work out, be all right from the long term. But it's interesting because he's been spending a lot of time talking smack on social media, particularly about Philadelphia. I mean, hearing the way he talks about Philadelphia and now seeing him get injured this early in training camp or hearing about it, it makes us think that maybe losing him really wasn't the worst thing in the world. Maybe he really wasn't the best long-term answer if there's going to be some injury concerns and considering the way he's talking about Philadelphia, it makes you wonder about his character now too. So now that we see that, we begin to think to ourselves, maybe there's some character concerns we missed with the guy. Now, I'm not going to wish injury upon him, of course not. But I'm just pointing out though that he did miss some time last year due to an injury, and he got injured early in training camp. So there are some injury concerns there as well. So maybe the Eagles don't feel his loss was as big a deal. I mean, it's just part of it. But so far, though, there's not really much going on. I mean, it is training camp right now. So, I mean, we'll talk more about it as we get closer to the season. I'll start to do some previews. Maybe next week might do some previews for the teams and what's expected. But as of right now, we're in the early stages of training camp. So really it's about seeing who teams fighting out for roster spots at this point. But yeah, and if you guys saw, like I said, you saw my Twitter where I was advertising this, or you saw my YouTube community tab, I said this episode was going to be a little bit different because after I was done talking about the running backs, I was going to switch gears and talk about the boxing world. Yeah, you don't really do that a whole lot around here, but there's going to be a big super fight in the boxing world this Saturday night. That's worthy of talking about. That's going to be a big headline in the sports world, especially this time of year where NBA is during its off season. You don't really, you already had the draft, most of the signings and trades have already happened. Baseball's kind of, baseball, it's no offense, but it's not my main sport. But boxing, I've been a fan of it. Now I'm more of a casual fan, and there is something for me to talk about. So, gonna get into it. We got Saturday night from Las Vegas, Nevada to unify the welterweight championship of the world. You got Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Bud Crawford. This is gonna be a big deal right here now. This is the only, what was it, one of the handful of unification fights you've had for the welterweight championship in boxing. Before you had Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns. That was a big fight in the 80s. You had Oscar De La Hoya, Felix Trinidad in 99. And now here in 2023, get Errol Spence Jr., Terrence Bud Crawford. At least this fight is happening now while there's still some room for this to possibly be exciting, or this could still be an interesting fight. Unlike Pacquiao Mayweather, which clearly happened about 5 years too late, because that was clearly, they were clearly past its expiration date. And it wasn't a very good, very exciting fight at all. It wasn't. But, but at least now we're getting this fight with Spence and Crawford. Wow, at least these guys still have something left in the tank, and it still feels like this could be a good fight. Because you got Errol Spence Jr. He's defending his WBC, WBA, and IBF title. Crawford's defending the WBO title, which he won from Jeff Horn back in 2018. But for those of you that know how Jeff Horn won it, it was in a decision against Manny Pacquiao in 2017, which nobody that saw that fight, except for the judges ringside, said that Jeff Horn won. Everyone else said there's no way he won that fight. So it didn't feel like as big of a fight. But so far, what I've seen from these guys right here, the coverage so far, a lot of people in the boxing world, both retired or current fighters, such as Roy Jones Jr., Antonio Tarver, James Toney, active guys like the Triple G. They're thinking that a lot of them are saying that Terrence Crawford's going to win. A lot of people, even Teddy Atlas, longtime boxing trainer, announcer, he thinks that Crawford's going to win this fight. And so a lot of people in the boxing world have him, even a lot of fans. He's going to be the favorite going into this one. But then again, there are some people that have their doubts. They think Spence is the better fighter. He's fought the tougher opposition. They're not too sure. They think that Crawford's had at times a bit of an easy pathway to the top. They feel like his run at lightweight at 135 and his run at 140s weren't as impressive as his resume suggests because the lack of competition in those divisions during the era. They feel like he was taking on a lot of easier competition. So you got that. So that's good. So there are some fans that think that Crawford's record's a little bit deceptive. He's taken the right fights to remain in that position. But then again, there have been times Crawford has come through and has persevered when his back was against the wall. So like the first real test he had was, who was that guy against Cuba back when he was a lightweight? It was just like in 2014, he managed to survive that one. But Crawford also got a big win over Danny Garcia back in 2020 because Danny Garcia was still in peak form when that fight happened. So obviously it was a big win there for Crawford. So for people that say, well, Crawford hasn't really had any real significant wins, you look closer at it. Well, he's got a win over Danny Garcia there on his resume. So I can say wrong on that one right there. But for Terrence Crawford, if he can win this fight here against Errol Spence, it's an opportunity for him to prove some of his critics wrong that say, oh, he's handpicked a lot of his opponents. His resume is deceptive. He's really not as dominant as his record looks. This is the golden opportunity for him to shut those critics up right there. And for Errol Spence Jr., this is an opportunity for him to establish himself and to help feed his ego because Errol Spence Jr. does have a massive ego. He got in charge with that DUI and he said, no injury. He tweeted something ignorant like no injuries. I'm a savage, which was absolutely stupid and boneheaded and reckless after getting a DUI to tweet something bragging that you didn't get hurt when you were out there on the road, possibly running the risk of hurting others. So there's an arrogant person right there in Errol Spence Jr. So yeah, that's a red flag about his character. But then again, he's certainly not the first person in the sports world, regardless of whether it be the combat world, the team world, whatever the case may be. And then of course you got, and the interesting part is you got this Errol Spence, who's a southpaw going into this, and then you got Terrence Crawford, who's a switch fighter. He can switch between southpaw and orthodox. And maybe that might happen here on Maybe on Saturday that's what happens. Maybe Crawford pulls something like that where he can switch between orthodox or southpaw. And Spence the southpaw used it against Mikey Garcia. Used that southpaw jab to throw off his rhythm. But it's gonna be. But overall, the point I'm getting is both these guys have had a decorated career thus far, and here they are. They're gonna face off Saturday night. You finally give the boxing world a big fight right there. Let them go out there. It'll draw some money for sure. Definitely. It'll draw money similar to Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia earlier this year. And I know it's going to be an interesting fight. I know some of my coworkers into boxing, they're talking about it. They're looking forward to it to see what goes down. And of course, a lot of people, even a lot of casual boxing fans that usually follow the big names, they're at least looking forward to this fight. So this should at least be a draw for the sport of boxing. At least give them something. At least give them something of note. And for some people that, more casual fans, it at least gives them something different to follow. They don't really follow boxing on a regular basis. Here, it gives them a fight they can at least watch, at least give them something a little different to follow for the weekend. But yeah, we'll ultimately have to see what goes down. I mean, a lot of people thinking that Crawford's going to win this, but some people still have their doubts. They don't think Crawford's really as legit as his record says. But hey, that's why we got the fight Saturday night, to ultimately put that debate to rest and see who really is the best fighter. I mean, at least here with this fight, Spence and Crawford, we're at least getting it while both guys are still somewhat in peak form. It's not like Mayweather-Pacquiao where it was about 5 years too late and the fight really didn't pan out as it should have. Or even like Roy Jones-Bernard Hopkins rematch back in 2010 where that fight was way past its expiration date and it was boring. It shouldn't be like that. This should at least be an exciting one right here. But at the same time, I do feel like the sport of boxing, they haven't done their best to promote this fight and really make this feel like a big fight. I mean, they're obviously doing some ads. Obviously, you're going to get some boxing fans, both casual and hardcore, definitely going to be interested in this fight for sure. So they'll definitely make some money off of this, but I don't feel like they've truly done their best job advertising it. The promoters at Top Rank, they haven't really gone out their way try to promote it. They could have been more aggressive in their approach, trying to spend some money to get some more advertisements out there, or try to make a deal, try to get some TV time to advertise the fight, maybe on Sports Center or something. Maybe get someone from Top Rank, like an Oscar De La Hoya or someone on there to promote it. I mean, they could do a better job with this. But part of the reason why in the United States, boxing isn't as big as it once was, like with that Muhammad Ali era or Sugar Ray Leonard eras, is because you don't have, because, it's not being promoted as well. And part of the problem is, too, there's too many world titles in each weight class in that sport. And because there's too many world titles, it takes away some of the significance of winning these world titles. I mean, this is a unification fight, yes, and that's good at least. The good thing about unifying the titles is at least we can get a true champion in the welterweight division. Get one world champion that's the true champion instead of having 4 belts and 2 different champions. You finally got a true champion that you can say is the champ. Problem is with having the WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO belts is you can't really call someone a true champion at a weight class because got this guy, this guy, this guy. And now Errol Spence Jr., he's won titles at lightweight, junior welterweight, and welterweight. But in an era where you have 4 titles in a weight class, it does take away some of the sting. It does take away some of the significance from it. It doesn't feel as special to win multiple world titles in multiple weight classes. I mean, it really doesn't because there's so many titles per weight class. That's just part of the reality of it. And that's part of the reason why I think some people don't feel as interested in seeing these title fights is because there's so many world titles in a weight class. It takes away the significance of title fights. There's too many titles and too many title fights. So it's like, for some people, they don't think these fights are all that special. They're not really as interested. Sadly, it's at the point where people are more interested in celebrity boxing. They're more interested in people like Logan and Jake Paul. They're more interested in John Hemingway, formerly John Morrison's WWE. They're more interested in Nate Robinson, former NBA player trying to fight on the undercard of Roy Jones and Mike Tyson. They're more interested in seeing some of the celebrity fights than some of the actual fights with full-time boxers who do this for a living. So that's also a shame on the sport right there. I feel like one of the other problems is, they beside doing a poor job promoting having too many world titles in a weight class, which takes away some of the significance of winning world titles, is they over-rely on holding fights in the casinos in Las Vegas when they could be doing these fights at bigger venues that could draw more of a crowd, like AT&T Stadium, especially at this time of year, there's no football. They could go there and get some money off of that. Now, I understand maybe the promoters feel it won't look best for TV to have it in a big, massive stadium. But even then, you could still go to other places like the Staples Center. You could think, okay, maybe the Staples Center comes across better for TV presentation. And yes, that might be true, but you still get some more people in that than you do some of the casinos in Vegas or even Madison Square Garden in New York City. That could come across well for TV presentation. You could get a crowd there too. But for whatever reason, they over-rely on Las Vegas, I feel, one of their biggest things. And so I feel like even though this is going to be a draw, this isn't going to really feel like as big a fight as it should, because there are still some sports fans out there that maybe casually glance at combat sports like boxing that aren't fully familiar with who Crawford and Spence are. Whereas like with Pacquiao Mayweather, at least with that fight, most of the people in the sports world, even those that only would casually glance at boxing, they knew who Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Money Mayweather were. Whereas in this case, they're not. Some of them aren't really familiar with these guys. So it's like, yes, while this is going to draw, it's not going to feel like the big super fight it should. It'll draw to some degree, but it's not going to be this big mega fight. It's not going to be like the days of Ali Frazier or the days of Leonard Hearns or Hagler Leonard, where they drew big time money off of it. It's not going to draw to that level here on Saturday night. I mean, yes, it'll be a draw. I mean, it'll probably be a better fight than Pacquiao Mayweather, It'll probably be better than most of these celebrity fights, but it's not going to have that like huge mainstream appeal that some of these big boxing fights once had in years past, like I said. But I feel like that's because the sport of boxing has done a poor job promoting. I feel like they've all, mainly with having too many world titles in each weight class, takes away some of the appeal of title fights. Sometimes we wait for these fights to happen a few years too late, like Pacquiao Mayweather, and that plays a role in these fans losing interest. Now, in this case with Spence and Crawford, you don't have that. You at least have with this case, okay, these guys are still relatively close to their primes. So at least you get the feeling like this is going to be a close battle that could go into the later rounds, possibly go to distance, and at least still be up for grabs as you get into the later rounds. So this should at least be an interesting fight right there. But I think it's just the sport of boxing for years. They've done a poor job promoting these big fights. Like, I mean, you'll get some TV ads, but they don't really go out their way to spend money to hype this up as a must-see event. They could even pump in more money to get more advertisements to try to get the word out there that, hey, this is going down, or do more, try to pay to get guys like Crawford and Spence on Sports Center more to promote it, get more people behind it. But they don't make that big effort. So yeah, so I feel like, yes, well, this is going to be a draw. It's not going to feel as big as it should. But ultimately, I'm not going to ramble on too much about that. All I'm going to say is this. So, I mean, around this time of year, late July, early August, you don't have a whole lot going on in the sports world. You got something there. You got a fight between two top boxers that's going to feel like it's going to be big to some degree. It should at least be interesting. Should see what happens. I'm thinking Crawford's going to get the upper hand here. I think he can prove some of his critics wrong that criticize him. Oh, for he was duck. That criticize him for, he's taking a lot of easy fights. He's too afraid to fight the big fight. This is an opportunity for him to prove them wrong and submit himself in the top of the welterweight division. Maybe this could lead to a rematch later down the line. Maybe at some point, maybe Tank Davis could move up from junior welterweight to welterweight, maybe fight the winner of this, and we could get another big fight sometime maybe later this year, maybe next year. But hey, at least it's nice that at least we got something different going on in the sports world. That's it. Nice to at least see something different coming from the combat world. That's at least going to be interesting. But ultimately, we'll have to see what happens there. So I know definitely all the boxing fans will be checking out Saturday night. Errol Spence Jr., Terrence Bud Crawford to see what goes down. See who's going to win it right there. I mean, like I said, I'll go with Crawford for my predictions, but any of you guys that are interested in this, you can comment. Let me know your prediction for Saturday night's fight. But yep, we will ultimately have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, I said everything I was going to say about that, and so actually I'm done talking about the main subjects. I was going a little bit early right now. But yeah, I mean, obviously it is that time of year right now where we don't have a whole lot in the sports world going. So sometimes you just look for stuff to talk about. So I'm trying to think, is there anything else I could talk about in the sports world before I go? Oh, we also did got Jaylen Brown signed a Supermax deal with the Celtics, and he's still there though. We'll have to see how that Supermax contract affects them. Now the Celtics, they do got Porzingis there as well, and Jason Tatum. We'll have to see how that trio does right there, if this works out and finally gets him over the hump. Now for Porzingis, it gives him a better chance at competing for a championship, but we'll have to wait and see. But we still got a few more months for the NBA season, and like I said, not much to talk about. At this point, I'm just trying to honestly fill out some time, try to keep this thing going a little bit longer. But yeah, I mean, while we're at it, I do want to say, though, on a side note, though, if everyone's still tuned in, watch out for the heat outside, especially if you're on by the Jersey Shore, because it's supposed to be a heat wave later this week. Please stay hydrated, whatever you do. Or if it's really hot wherever you're living, especially if you're up closer to Philly, if it's really hot, then try to stay indoors if you can. Or if you do step outdoors, please have something with you, a water, a Gatorade, something by you to at least hydrate. So please stay safe out there from the heat and wear sunscreen if you're going to go by the beach, folks. But yeah, that's really all I got for you right now. Like I said, it's a relatively slow sports week. I mean, yeah, we got a little bit of NFL news, get a big super fight in the boxing world, which I just discussed. And it's really all I got for you for episode 7, man. But hey, now the NFL training camps to start, and that episode 8 next Tuesday this time will be the first episode in August. That gives me a little more to talk about when it comes to the football world. So for next week, for episode 8, expect me to come on here and recap the Spence Crawford fight at the beginning. Then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the upcoming NFL season and preview what lies ahead for all 32 teams. So that'll be on next week's Sports Talk from the Heart. If there's any interesting stuff from the sports world, news-wise, or something that I can low-key troll about, I'll drop that in my YouTube shorts. And tomorrow on the Hardcore Sports Network, my channel, I'll be alongside Mitch Kofsky, Blaze Radio, Next Shift Randy, and Rio from the Rio Houston Rockets fan, where we're going to talk some NBA basketball. We're kind of in the slow season, so we'll probably be talking about random stuff, talking about some possibilities, talk about some trade rumors, some what ifs, do some fantasy drafts. That'll be tomorrow, 5 p.m. for all the basketball fans. You can check that with us out there tomorrow. So to everyone that tuned in, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't done so, feel free to drop a like, subscribe to both my channel and the Hardcore Sports Network. If you haven't done so already, I'm going to drop the link to both in the comments before I head out. So again, to everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And again, stay safe from the heat out there, because it's going to be a hot one. And most of all, like I said, enjoy your Tuesday. And yep, and I'm going to share the link to the Hardcore Sports channel so you can subscribe to that if you haven't done so already before I head on out. So that's my channel. And there's the Hardcore Sports Network's link right there. So again, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, Nicky Steez signing off.